Well, I want to spend a little time here, or actually, I'm not going to. I'm going to ask somebody else to come share a little bit about. Let's just do a story of forgiveness. Join us.
Ooh, a lot of people in here. See this from the front row. Hi, my name's Misty Wallace, and I'm from Indianapolis. And I'm here this evening to share my testimony with you. I know some of you guys are familiar faces. I've seen you before. I've shared my story many times in Indianapolis, so you get to hear me again tonight. I'm still on this path. Um, my journey started on October 18th, 1992. I was a senior in high school with a full ride scholarship to play softball. I was out with my boyfriend, haunted housing, and we got into an argument, and we decided to split ways. So I was driving that night, so I drove him home. When he got out of the car, he was angry, he was mad, slammed my car door. I drove off. And believe it or not, in 1992, we did not have cell phones. So I pulled over to use a payphone. I pulled into a Burger King restaurant around 11 o'clock at night to call my mom and dad to let them know I wasn't coming home. When I got out of my car, I left my keys in the ignition and my purse on the seat. I was in my neighborhood. I knew everybody. They knew me. Felt safe. I called home from the payphone in this Burger King restaurant. And a few seconds later, I noticed they didn't answer the phone. So I said, well, I'm going to call my friend, let her know or my boyfriend, let him know I'm not going home so he doesn't call and wake my mom and dad up. So I noticed while I was on the phone with him, a car had pulled around through the back of the Burger King, but up towards the front door, which I thought was kind of odd because I knew that the inside was closed, that the drive-through was open because I had just gone through it. A gentleman exited the passenger side of his vehicle, and he walked towards the back end of my car, and he asked me how long I was going to be. My boyfriend on the phone at the time said, "Who's that?" I said, "Someone that wants to use the phone." He said, "Okay, call me when you get to Jeanette's." As soon as I hung up the phone, I turned around to walk to get the back into my vehicle. I walked towards him. He walked towards me. He pulled a gun. He stuck the gun to my left face, the left side of my face. He shot me. The bullet went through my left cheek, down through my esophagus, bounced up and broke the top two vertebrae in my neck. My body automatically went into shock. My head landed underneath the front tire of my vehicle. And the only thing I could think about at that time was, please God, don't let this car start. I seen him go, he walked around. I could see him. I couldn't move my body because my body was in shock. I seen him get into my vehicle from underneath my car, and my head was lodged underneath the front tire, and all I could think about was, please God, don't let this car start. I couldn't move. A few seconds later, he exited my vehicle. As he walked away, I said, please help me. And he left. He left me there to die in the parking lot that night. He got in the car and drove off. A gentleman that was working on a late night shift that night got called in. I didn't know this gentleman until October 18th either. His name was Tim Williams, but he got called in. There's a big company in Indianapolis called Rolls-Royce, and he got called in that Saturday night to do a certain thing, they brought some sand over from Saudi Arabia, so he was testing the special equipment for the military. And he got called in on a Saturday night. He finished the test. He left early. When he leaves, he usually leaves and goes right, pulls out of the parking lot and goes right and gets on 70 and goes home. Well, this night he turned left because he wasn't thinking. Thank God, because he drove up Kentucky Avenue, the same area where I was laying on the ground in this parking lot. As he drove by, he just happened to see out of the corner of his eye that a body was laying on the ground. He pulled into the Burger King restaurant, shined his lights on my vehicle, and noticed that I was struggling. He came up on me. He rolled me over on my side. At that point, I was then gurgling and choking in my own blood. He rolled me on my side. He was a he was a Vietnam vet. He was a chaplain in a church, or a pastor in a church, and he was also American Red Cross trained in anything possible. He rolled me over on my side and he said, "I got to go get something out of my car. I'll be right back. But I'm not going to leave your side until the paramedics get here." And I could hear him, but everything was so, my ears were ringing profusely, just loud ringing in my ears. And he did. He came back. He kept me on my side. He tucked some stuff up underneath my head. The paramedics got there. They put a shock suit on me. They took me to Wishard Hospital, which is now Eskenazi Health in Indianapolis. I went through a bunch of testing. They found out that the bullet was still in the back of my neck, but it had severed the carotid artery in my neck, and I needed to immediately go into surgery. They got my family there, and this was probably the hardest part through the whole thing. Was I was waiting in this room to go into the OR, and the doctor and the chaplains were sitting there talking to my parents, and they were waiting for all my family to come up there. And when I came to, I noticed I was in this room and it was really bright, but I could see my mom and dad, my grandma and grandpa, and my brothers and my sister. But that was the hardest thing for me to swallow because they were saying goodbye to me. I went into surgery several hours later. I woke up on a ventilator in a drug-induced coma on life support for 3 days. I did wean off of it okay, and they put me in a regular room day 4. Day 7, I left the hospital. I went home to start a very, very, very long recovery. I had to learn how to speak. I had to learn how to chew. I had to learn how to move my facial muscles. The bullet did stay in for 2 years, but my dad, he was a truck driver, and he was on the road quite a bit, and he was off for a while when all this happened to me, and he had just been back to work. I was home about a month, and I was getting physical therapy 3 times a week, and he got home from work on that Friday, and it was his first week back, and he had just gone and picked my car up because I don't think I mentioned before that my car had to be towed from the crime scene because the starter went out on my car. But my dad, he came and he got home from work that day, and I said, "Dad, please get me out of this house. I'm about to go crazy." I was a very active girl. I played softball every night of the week. And being cooped up in a house and going for physical therapy 3 times a week, and then I couldn't move my neck, so I had staples from the back of my ear all the way down to my throat for a good month. And my dad said, "Okay, we'll go visit your grandfather when I pick your car up at the car lot." So we were in my car. Indianapolis is a pretty decent-sized city. What are the odds that that very night we come to the intersection of Vermont and Lyndhurst on the west side of Indianapolis, and we're face to face with the vehicle that pulled into the Burger King restaurant that night, sitting at the stoplight? First night out. I looked at my dad and I said, "That's the car that pulled into the Burger King restaurant that night. It was face to face with me at the light." And my dad said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I'm positive." I said, "The only thing different is the guy driving the car is the guy that actually shot me." So we followed him. He pulled into a gas station. He went in and got a pop. He came back out and got in his car. I did write down his license plate number. I went to my grandfather's house, which was right around the corner, and I made a phone call to my detective. And I told him, I said, "I have the license plate." I told him that I just came across what had just happened and that I seen the car. I seen the guy that shot me. My detective was in Missouri at the time. He was bringing someone back on that was being expedited back to Indiana. And he said, "I'll be there in the morning, but I'll send another detective out there tonight. And we'll keep an eye on the vehicle and we'll keep an eye on him." So he did that. The next morning, they knocked on his door. They asked him about a girl at a payphone and a shooting. He said, "I didn't do it. It wasn't me. You got the wrong person." They didn't believe his lies. There was enough evidence. They took him downtown to the Marion County building. and they booked him for attempted murder, carrying a handgun in the state of Indiana without a license. They threw out they charged him with auto theft and robbery. But he still stuck with the story. He wasn't guilty, so that led to a jury trial. We went to trial several months later. Day 3 of the trial, about 11 o'clock at night, the judge was pretty tired, but he did talk to the jury came in, and they were hung 11-1. But the judge that night said, go back in, review the evidence, go through everything thoroughly. A little after midnight, the jury did come back out, and they said that they did have a guilty verdict. So he was then being sentenced for attempted murder and carrying a handgun in the state of Indiana without a license. He did get sentenced to 20 years. He went behind the wall at Pendleton in Indiana for attempted murder and the carrying a handgun without a license. They threw out the other 2 charges, but he was looking at 20 years, and he got the minimum. So I went on with my life. I got married. I moved to California. My ex-husband was in the military, in the Navy. While I was out in California, my life had slowed down. I graduated high school. I lost my scholarship to play softball, and my life was constantly, I went to a jury trial, moved to California, which was 2,000 miles away from home, and we didn't know anyone. I started experiencing post-traumatic stress syndrome. I started having panic attacks. I was going to the hospital day in and day out. Finally, they sent me to see a psychologist at the Naval Hospital, where they did a psych evaluation, and they definitely said I was experiencing post-traumatic stress syndrome. And they ended up giving my husband an honorable discharge from the United States military because of my mental health. We moved back to Indianapolis. We started a family. I went back to school, furthered my education. Started working, living life, just trying to live life. I always wondered, what was he doing in prison, but I couldn't find that out. I'm the victim. And a few years had gone by, and my husband and I went through a horrible divorce. He cheated on me, and that was very unfaithful. I lost my best friend, which was a big trust factor for me. Then shortly after that, I was on my own for the first time in my life with 2 kids. I was working 3 jobs. I had my niece, my own family. I asked my niece to come watch my kids for the evening while I went in and covered a shift. She came over, watched my kids for me that night. I came home from work. I gave her money, and her friend, she had brought a friend with her, which is no big deal. She said, "Bye, Aunt Misty," gave me a hug and kiss, bye. She left. Monday, I went to work, came home from a 12-hour shift, and her friend had a drug habit because my house was empty. I was robbed blind, and I had nothing left. That was my rock bottom. That was my rock bottom. My own family, friends stealing from me, taking what I had left. I didn't want to be here anymore. I called my ex-husband and asked him to come and get the kids, that I wasn't feeling well. He came and picked them up. I remember he pushed the door back open on me. He said, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I said, "I'm just sick." And he shut the door and left. I went in the kitchen and I got a knife. I sat down on the floor for several hours. I even processed it. I knew that my neck would be a very easy way to go. I made a phone call to Tim Williams, the gentleman that, because we stayed friends and I did a lot of counseling, group counseling with him. Tim Williams is 83 years old today. He was the gentleman that found me in the parking lot. I made a phone call to him that night, and I told him what I was doing. And I told him I was just tired. Couldn't understand why everything was happening to me. He said, "Give me 5 minutes. I'll be right there." And he came and he sat down on the floor with me. And then he began to kind of make me a little bit madder because he told me how selfish I was being. I was getting mad, actually. He told me that my kids needed me and that that wouldn't be a very good choice. I needed you. He said, I needed you too. There was a reason why you came into my life. So, um, Tim Williams baptized me in his church in October 2002 himself. And I went on with my life again, living life. Things were going well. Picked myself up. My kids and I were doing great together. And then I get that letter from the Department of Corrections. It says, my offender's being released. I was mad. I would lie to you if I told you I wasn't mad. I was mad. I was angry. I couldn't understand. So I called downtown to the central office and I said, what's going on? Why is he being released? They told me he did his time. Oh, that made me even madder. I said, what do you mean he did his time? He's got sentenced 20 years and he's only been in prison for 8 years and 8 months. And they said he did his time. And I said, well, that opened a whole new perspective of my life. Now I have 2 kids. What's he been doing in prison? Has he been sitting there plotting how to come out and finish me off? I didn't know him. He didn't know me. So I filed for a restraining order, which was the conclusion we came to, but I wasn't promised that the restraining order would be held up in court because he's been incarcerated for 8 years and 8 months, and I guess it has to be within a certain amount of days. I filed for the restraining order and I got a court date. I went downtown to the city county building that evening or that date with my youngest brother, Tim. We went downtown and I remember we went down in the basement of the city county building and I was sick. I was nervous. I was scared because I have to see him. And so when we got down in the basement, I remember I told my brother, I was like, I don't feel good. I'm going to go to the restroom. He's like, okay. I came out and I was all hot and sweaty and my face was probably purple. And my brother said, look, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This place is crowded. He's like, I haven't had lunch, so I'm going to go get something out of the candy machine. Do you want anything? And I was like, no. And I remember laying my head up against the wall, laying back against the wall to try to cool down. And when I did, I lifted my head forward and I could see my offender walking towards me. And he walked right up to me in the courtroom that day and he said, do you know where this courtroom's at? And I looked over at my brother who was standing by the candy machine. His face was just blood purple. He was so mad. But he was watching his every move. But he didn't know who I was. He didn't even know me. And I pointed down the hall and he walked on and went into the courtroom that day. I was the last one to go that day. I remember it very clearly. Several hours later, I got called up to the stand, and the judge felt that I was fearful for my life. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. He tried to kill me. She granted the restraining order. But as I was leaving the courtroom, I stood up when it was all done. I started to walk out the door, and all I could hear my offender say was, Your Honor, can I say something to Mist? And as soon as he started to say my name, my offender, my brother, I could feel him come up over the top of me. He told him to shut your mouth. Don't talk to my sister. There's nothing that you can say that will ever make this right. Ever. Shut your mouth. Don't talk to her. And the bailiffs and the sheriff started coming out. They separated us. They took him off into a room, and then we left the courthouse that day. And I'm not going to lie to you, as a victim, when I got into my brother's work truck that day, I immediately thought to myself, is he going to apologize to me for shooting me in the head and then leaving me to die in a parking lot? Was he going to say he was sorry? Well, I went back to church with Tim Williams after I was baptized. And the preacher kept saying, forgiveness, 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 forgiveness. And I was, no, that's not happening. Nope, never. And I started thinking, and I started learning a lot about forgiveness. And it was really heavy on my heart for a long time, but I didn't know how. I know a lot of people are out here going, yeah. I didn't know how. I was just like you. I didn't know how. I didn't know what to expect. But when I started thinking more about it, I knew that and the way I look at it for me, myself, is that I don't ever have to forget what happened to me. I don't have to forget. But what I can do now is I choose to look at it in a different way. I'm not going to no longer let it keep the bitterness inside me because I was bitter for 17 years. I had a lot of hate, a lot of anger and bitterness inside me. And I sent him a message on Facebook, and I needed my forgiveness to be real. And I sent him a message in 2010. And I sent him a message and I told him, I said, I know you know who I am. My name has been on a piece of paper underneath your bunk for many years. On or about October 18th, you knowingly intended to kill Misty Wright. I choose to forgive you. I am no longer angry. I am no longer mad. I choose to forgive you. I didn't know what that was going to look like. He gave me his phone number. He wanted to talk to me. So I gave him the front row seat to what he did to me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't yelling. So at this time, I'm going to call up my shooter who is here with us today. He is my friend. He is a chaplain for the last almost 10 years in the Indiana Department of Corrections. He's at the Maximum Security Women's Prison in Indianapolis. Chaplain Blackburn.
What kind of monster, what kind of human being would walk into a parking lot and do what you all have heard this evening that I did? No different than the men and women that you go into the prisons as a part of Kairos to serve. I was someone who needed the love of God, but I was blinded by greed. I was blinded by my own wickedness, my own sinfulness. I grew up on the west side of Indianapolis. I had a good home, had a mom and dad that loved me very much. At 13 years old, I decided that I wanted to begin to take things that I didn't have money to buy. I began to steal, started stealing bicycles, hood ornaments off of cars, car radios, breaking into houses, anything I could do to make money. 14, I thought I was going to be tough. I joined a little street gang in our neighborhood. Just a bunch of our friends got together. But at 15, I got my first gun. I was in and out of juveniles, fighting on a regular basis. I'm 16 years old. We started stealing cars, started doing drive-by shootings, started getting more and more violent. Started drinking at 16 on a regular basis. When I was 17, I found my drug of choice, which was LSD. But I had a dark spiritual practice. I was kind of a Hollywood form of Satanism. I was fascinated by Charles Manson, fascinated by Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, serial killers, horrorcore movies. When I went to the park one day when it was on Halloween. Actually, I was still 16 at this time. I'd got a black cat because it represented evil to me. And I took this black cat and I slit its throat. And I went down to the park with some candles and I cut my own body and I mixed the blood of that cat in my own blood. And I made a covenant or an agreement with Satan that I was going to serve him for the rest of my life. 17 years old, I called myself the boogeyman. Sleeping all day. I was staying up all night. Just more robberies, more violence, more things we was just doing wrong. When I turned 18, you heard the story. We was out. We was going to go rob a store. We needed a car. Driving around looking for a car. As you heard the testimony, we found a car. Figured she was standing at a phone booth. Most likely the keys was in the ignition. And as I went up to the back of the car to look, the keys were in the ignition. I wasn't wearing a mask. And she had turned and looked at me. And at that moment, I made a decision that I can never undo. I made a choice I can never take back. I pulled a gun. I put it to her head. And I pulled the trigger. I didn't know what you know. I didn't know her body had landed underneath the tire of her car. I was a car thief. I went and jumped in the car. I went to start the car. It didn't do anything. I didn't know what you know, that she was underneath the car praying, God, please don't let this car start, because she couldn't move. I'm a car thief. I tried a second time. Car didn't do anything. No noise, no nothing. It was a clutch. I checked the gears. I checked everything. Seemed to be in working order. I tried a third time to start the car. It didn't start. Realizing I wasn't going to get the car, I got out, went back to the vehicle, and as I was walking past her, I heard her say, help me. She said, help me. And I walked away, leaving her there to die. I didn't think about her. I didn't want to know. I didn't watch the news. I didn't look at the newspaper. I didn't want to know if she lived. I didn't want to know if she died. I just went on like nothing had happened. I'd had a knee surgery that was already scheduled before the shooting, had a knee surgery, and was at home recovering from knee surgery. I'd been home after the shooting. It was a week after the shooting, I had surgery. I'd been home about 3 weeks. It was about a month after the shooting. I was sitting at home. I was able to get around on crutches. And I was like, man, I'm thirsty. I went to the refrigerator, nothing to drink. So I said, man, I got some change. I'm going to go down to the gas station to get a pop. How much trouble can I get into? First stoplight, you heard the story. First stoplight I came to, I'm face to face with the woman I'd shot a month earlier. I didn't know it was her. I didn't see her. I didn't notice her. She noticed me, got my license plate. Next day, detectives were at the door, and I lied. I lied to the detectives. I lied to Misty. I lied to the prosecutors. I lied to my mother. My life is just one big lie. I went to jail. Thankfully, they didn't believe my lies. 9 months at the county jail, went to jury trial. I was found guilty of attempted murder, carrying a handgun. I was guilty of robbery. I did take her purse, but the jury found me not guilty because they'd never found a purse. I got found not guilty for auto theft because, as she testified, the starter went out in the car, so I never was able to steal the vehicle. Went to Pendleton, got 20 years. I know 20 years is not enough time for what I had done, but 20 years was longer than I had been on earth, and I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, and I started serving my time, and I wasn't doing it right. I tatted devils all over my arms, still getting high in prison, still drinking in prison, still stealing in prison, still messing with gangs in prison. And I'd been locked up about 3 years. I was getting ready to be 21. And my mother, how many of y'all are praying mothers or have praying mothers? God hears mothers' prayers. My mom told me a day before my 21st birthday, she said, Keith, I want you to listen to the country radio station. I'm going to dedicate a song to you. I said, Mom, I listen to rap. I don't want to listen to country. She said, just listen to this song. I'm going to dedicate it to you during lunchtime hour. So 11 o'clock, just listen. And I put my headphones on, sit down on my bunk. I was in 331J, Pendleton Reformatory in a cell house, sitting on my bunk, just me and the headphones. And the radio announcer said, this song goes out to Keith, who's in Pendleton. Said, God loves you, and your mama tried. And played a song by Merle Haggard called Mama Tried. And it was the first time I'd heard this song. And in spite of my Sunday learning, to the bad I kept on turning. I said, man, that was me. I was raised up to go to church, to fear God, to pray, but I chose to go a different way. I said, no one could stir me right, but Mama tried. Man, that was me. Her pleading, I denied. I said, man, that was me. Turned 21 in prison. That was me. And I'm sitting there, and I had that, as you know, Kairos is God's timing. This was God's timing for my life. Something was getting ready to change. I didn't know what it was, didn't know how God was going to do it, didn't know I'd been worshiping the devil, didn't even know how to turn to God. And I got right there at that moment, a correctional officer had came by my cell, and he said, man, you're 21 in prison. Don't you wish you could go to the bars? I know what he was talking about. He was talking about when you're 21, you can go to the bars and drink, but I've been drinking since I was 16. So I looked up through the bars. I said, sir, I am sick of bars. And I was. I didn't know what that meant, but I was. I was sick and tired of bars. I was sick and tired of my life being the way it was. I needed to change. That evening, I went to the evening chow hall when it was time for dinner, and there was a man down the range from me. I called him old school. He was about 30 years old. And I said, man, I said, man, I need to change. I need to make some changes. I told him about the song. I told him what I was thinking. He said, youngster, if you want to change, if you really want to change, he said, you're going to need to change your nouns. I'm like, man, I dropped out of high school. I slept through English class. I said, man, I don't even know what a noun is. What's a noun? Y'all slept through too? What's a noun? He said, change the people you with, the places you're going, and the things you're doing. I said, man, you have lost your mind. I'm in this place with you people, and we doing these things. We were still doing wrong things. We wasn't living right. We was in prison, but we were still criminal minded. We were still doing criminal things. We were still setting our life up for another prison sentence. He said, man, you're in a cell house. He said, go to the dorm. Now, my first thought was, man, why would I want to go to a dorm? I'm in a cell. I've got my own TV, my own hot pot, a fan, my own space. I don't have to share nothing with nobody. If I go to a dorm, I'm going to have to share living space. He said, hey, you said you wanted to change. If you go to the dorm, you'll be in a new place. I'm like, okay, that's a new place. When you get to that new place, there's going to be some new people. Okay, new people, different people. I don't know the people in the dorm. He said, when you get to that new place with the new people, you can choose to do new things. Now, I didn't know what God had planned. 30 days later, I moved into the dorm. There was 24 men in this dorm. There was 12 beds down one side, 12 beds down the other side. We had 2 lockers that stood stacked up on top of each other. We had a military-style foot locker that went up underneath the bed. We had a chair that was mine, and then there was a table that needed to be shared at the end, and I had to share that with my neighbor. And the first thing I noticed was my neighbor was not sharing. And I identified, I didn't know him, I didn't know what he looked like, I didn't know anything, but I knew he had the biggest Bible I'd ever seen in my life. He had a Strong's Concordance. I later found out it was a Hebrew lexicon, a Greek lexicon, a Vine's expository, all big books, if y'all know what them are. Well, he comes in from work. He was an electrician. He comes in from work and introduced myself. His name was Jim. And I told him, I said, I'm going to need to clear off a little space off this table. And he said, have you read this book? Yeah, I've read the book. I hadn't. I'm still lying. He said, what did you think about the book? Well, I think the book is in my way. But I argued with Jim for 3 months. For 3 months, I argued with Jim over that book. He told me about Jesus. He told me about the blood. He told me about Calvary. He told me about the death, burial, resurrection. He told me about salvation. I realized 3 months into my arguing with Jim, I was no longer arguing with Jim. It was God's time for my life. And I was telling God, I didn't do anything. I'm not guilty. I'm in prison for what somebody else done. God said, what? Well, Lord, you didn't what? Well, God, okay. I'm guilty. I'm guilty. God already knew I was guilty, but now I'm telling God. So I'm going through the repentance process and confessing my sins, and told Jim. And I knew God had forgiven me based on what Jim had been teaching me about the scriptures. But I knew I needed to tell my mother. And I knew this was going to be difficult. How do you tell your mom you did something that horrible? Mother's Day of 1996, I wrote my mother a Mother's Day card, and all I said was, Mom, I am guilty. You talk about freedom. Man, I felt so light. I felt like I could have floated up over that wall. And my mom didn't tell a whole lot of lies, but she did tell one lie often. And it was every time someone would say, Lou, how's Keith doing? How's your son? She would look him right in the eye and say, oh, Keith, he's fine. He's away at school. And I told her on a visit, I said, Mom, I am not in school. I am in prison. She said, you better learn something while you're there. So my mom, I listened to my mom. I enrolled at the feet of Jesus, became a disciple of the Lord. I learned how to use them books that Jim had in my way. Them books were no longer in my way. Matter of fact, I had wrote letters home to my mom asking if she could buy me some of them books. And she did. She got me a Bible just like Jim had, and she got me the other books, and just learned how to study. I got my GED, enrolled in college classes, got transferred to CIF, which was a medium security facility. At that time, my mother had got real sick, and my mother had passed away while I was still incarcerated, but she knew I was serving the Lord. And life was going real fast, and my out date was fast approaching. And I'd never been a Christian on the street, but I knew I was going to do the same thing I'd learned inside. When I get out, I was going to have new places to go. That became church. That became outreaches, new people. That was going to be church people. The new things I was going to do was going to be what the church people was doing. I did find out, though, when I first came home, church people like to eat. So we did a lot of going out to eat and just fellowshipping and just being a part of the community. And life was going good. Life's going good. I met my wife. She's with me now. We just celebrated 19 years of marriage. Life was going real well. And I got involved finally. Prisons let me come back in as a volunteer, and I got in a position where I had an opportunity to become a chaplain with the Indiana Department of Corrections, but I'd already had my working towards my bachelor's degree while I was incarcerated. I got out, I finished it up at Ball State, graduated in 2005 in Muncie, and then in 2009, I got the opportunity to enroll in an MDiv program to become a chaplain with the Indiana Department of Corrections. And I've been a chaplain now for going on this December will be 10 years, and been involved with everybody. But while I was in seminary, I got that Facebook message that Misty said, I choose to forgive you. Wow. For everything I had done, the pain I had caused her, the hurt, the fear, the panic attacks, the depression. My bullet nearly killed her at the scene. 2 years later, my bullet was still in her neck. It moved. She lost consciousness while she was out in California. My bullet 2 years after the crime was still causing hurt and pain. When I shot Misty, I didn't just shoot Misty. I shot her mother, her father, her grandmother, her grandfather, her two brothers, her sister, the graduating class of Decatur Central High School in 1993. In the process, even one of my own cousins, which was a good friend with her, and all the people that loved her was also my victims. And she gave me a front row seat to know what my crime had done. And we began to talk. We began this awesome journey. As a chaplain, I encountered Kairos for the first time as a chaplain. We had started a prayer share group. I didn't understand Kairos, and I apologize because I didn't understand riverbanks. I just grabbed a logo and put a flyer out and started prayer and share and prayed Kairos will come, and Kairos did come. Kairos came, and thankfully we got we was fishing in deer stands, but we got down out of them, and we got back in the riverbanks, and we did 3 weekends at the men's facility I was at. And then when I came to Indiana Women's Prison, they had just started doing 2 Kairos a year, so that was an upgrade. And when I first got there, they said that for some reason, my facility did not allow the forgiveness cookies. And I couldn't figure out, with my experience with forgiveness, why our facility wasn't allowing forgiveness cookies. And the only answer I got was, well, they was giving them to people. So I showed my bosses the manual and showed them in the book they are giving it to someone that they're going to forgive, and forgiveness is good, and it worked out. We've been blessed. Those of you from that's in the women's prison might be the crowd. I know we've did it for the last 3. We've had the forgiveness cookies, but we're going to continue on. It's powerful. It's a powerful moment. But forgiveness, it's not forgetting, like Misty said. Forgiveness is remembering in new ways, not allowing it to hold us back in life. And they often ask, how do you know this is real? How do you know you're forgiven? I was able to finally say, I'm sorry to Misty while we were speaking inside of prison. And I'd said it over the phone. I said it in writing. I'd said it, but to look her in the face and say, I am sorry. And she knew it was real. And she'd already forgiven me, but it just became a little more authentic in the whole context. But when I really knew that she had really forgiven me, we was doing a conference at the old Union Station downtown Indianapolis for correctional professionals, and our talk was on forgiveness. We had the room set up, and she said, Keith, are you going to be in this room for a minute? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, watch my purse for me. I'm going to go to the restroom. I said, do you realize what you just asked me to do? She said, I didn't even think about it. This forgiveness is real. And not only as an ex-offender, I know how important it is for you to bring the love of God. If I wouldn't have encountered Jesus in prison, I wouldn't be standing before you now. Kairos wasn't a part of my life because it wasn't in our prisons at that time. But as a chaplain now, what you do is priceless. What you do is invaluable. I've seen weekends change lives. I've seen Prayer and Share continue that ministry. Continuing ministries, what you're here to do, to continue meeting, to continue loving. To love, listen, to do everything Kairos is doing, because you never know what is going to change someone's life. Country, I was saved by country music. But God is able to use what we would say is insignificant things, but to just know, like the back of them crosses say, Christ is counting on you. Just that reminder. And I want to remind you as Kairos volunteers, and thank you, but Christ is counting on you. And COVID, hopefully, would give us an opportunity that we've reflected and to be able to see the blessings in the small things, the blessings in the time because we were busy. And I was busy throughout the whole COVID because of my job. I not only was chaplain, I was making sack lunches. I was doing work, correctional officer work. I was unlocking doors. I was, we was delivering commissary. We was doing duties as assigned and with no volunteers. And now, thankfully, we're getting back to volunteers being allowed back in. So hopefully weekends get started back. But after, sounds like you're going to be busy in Kentucky. But don't forget Indiana and the other states. But recruit. God has a lot of work, but just see the blessings, because you are a blessing to us, and I hope that we have been a blessing to you. Thank you.